Good morning. Welcome to day 3 of BAAFF Mini Fest, December 3rd to 5th. Woo woo. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki and all of our workshops and events are taking place in Chibuktuk, Halifax. We are honored to work and serve on this land. Today we have a workshop with Heidi Hallett,
Hello.
a wonderful person and partner of ours. She's also on our advisory committee. She's phenomenal. Art journaling today, and we're doing art as a healing tool workshop.
Yes, we are.
And then later today, we have a gallery showing and a town hall all about accessibility. So I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, folks. I am so happy to be here. I hope there's lots of you joining along at home. My name is Heidi Hallett, and I am a local artist and small business owner. And many of you know me from my Instagram handle, Hatched Halifax Heidi, where I post all of the things that I make, and a lot of that is art journaling. Art journaling for me is an outlet for my mental health, my well-being. It's a self-care tool that I use on the regular, pretty much on a daily basis. And I'm here to talk to you and show you some ways that you can make art at home with very little in terms of supplies. You don't need to run out to the craft store and buy a bunch of stuff. You'll be amazed at what you can find at home to make art that is inexpensive and fun and beautiful. So what's an art journal? You're probably sitting there wondering, I've heard of a journal, I know what art is, how do the two come together? Art journaling is essentially whatever you want it to be, whatever you need it to be. I have a little basket here, we'll do some show and tell, full of a bunch of my journals, and you can see some of them here across the table. And I've got one right here that I'm working on. A lot of times I will take an existing book, this is a hardcover book that I gutted, and then I made it into my own journal. And at the moment, December is a very busy time for me, so I dip in and out of this for some days, 5 or 10 minutes. Other days, I'm in here for hours creating. So if you are following along at home, you're going to want to gather some supplies. So we're going to go through some places that you can find paper and art supplies at home in just a moment. But basically, if you have some paper and you have some scissors and maybe a glue stick or some glue tape, grab some crayons, markers, pens, paints if you have them, a regular old pencil, anything will do. Grab a few things that you have so that you can play along. I've got a couple of wonderful gals here with me from Reachability who are going to make art along with me this morning. And we will chat about art and chat about well-being, and just hope that this is a really fun and informative couple of hours for you all. The past 2 years have been like no other. I don't think we've experienced a time like this with the pandemic. It was, well, it hasn't been quite 2 years, but March 2020 when things started to sort of go sideways. And it stirred up a lot of emotions for all of us. Everybody has had their challenges. They're all different, but they're all valid and they're all real challenges. So for me, having a daily art practice is a way that I can escape. It's a way that I can process these challenging emotions, different emotions. Sometimes it's difficult to put your feelings into words, which is why I like art journaling. It can be all about the words, or there can be no words at all. It can just be as simple as finger painting if I want it to be. It really is a place for me also to record events and save memories and sort of document the passage of time. At the beginning of the lockdown last year, obviously I couldn't go to an art supply store, and I love making my own journals. So these are journals that I made out of cereal boxes, cracker boxes, pizza boxes, whatever, and paper kicking around the house. You can see here, one of the things I did was cut a girl off a box of Little Debbie snack cakes, and I gave her a mask. So these journals, we'll take a little bit more of a deep dive into them in a few minutes, but they really helped me to process what was going on when we were in lockdown. You can see this frowny-faced woman here saying we have to flatten the curve. But it was a way for me to keep my hands busy, keep my mind busy, and also a way to just sit quietly and do something comforting for myself. A lot of people I know will say, I can't make art. I've never made art. I can't draw. I can't paint. Oh, my handwriting's horrible. Honestly, I promise you, none of that matters. If you think back to when you were a child, and somebody gave you a coloring book or a piece of paper and a box of crayons, you just went with abandon. You didn't care what it looked like. You weren't trying to make the next beautiful piece of realistic art, draw a portrait of your mother that looks exactly like her. Your mom had a circle and 2 arms for sticks and maybe some jagged teeth, and that was beautiful. That's all you need. So we're trying to tap into that feeling of play, just being loose, being comfortable. For me, it's a lot like going for a walk in nature or curling up under a blanket with a really good book and a cup of hot tea. It's just, I know it's good for myself. So it's something I try to do every day. Now, let's start looking at some of the stuff, because I have a lot of stuff here you can see. So again, if you're following along at home, grab your recycling bin maybe, or maybe you've already pulled some papers out. Tara and Jessica already have some papers on their desks, so they're all good to go. And you might be thinking, oh, I don't have a sketchbook, I don't have any art papers, I wish I had some watercolor paper. Doesn't matter. Brown paper bag is fantastic for painting on, making journals. I've got a couple different sizes. And this lovely bit of glittery paper is the top part of a gift bag. Honestly, I can tell you I received a gift in this at least 6 years ago, and I've been using scraps of this bag the whole time. Another paper bag, this one white with a handle, had some yummy chocolates in it. Gift wrap from 4 or 5 Christmases ago. Again, I bet you if we looked in every one of these journals, you would find a piece of these polka dot papers. Some packaging from something. Actually, I think this might have been Christmas chocolates. This stuff is great, not only for cutting up for collage, but also we can make some texture and things like that, which I will show you in a little while. Tissue paper. And one of my personal favorites, I've always wondered who really uses paper doilies anymore. Do we need them in the world? Yes, we do. They make beautiful artwork. I bought one doily on top of a piece of, this is old book paper from a book written in German. No idea what it says. But, put some paint down, and then I've got 2 beautiful pieces of paper to use in my art. Paper napkins. I never go to someone's house for lunch or cocktails without snagging a few extra napkins off the table. More gift wrap. Magazine paper is fantastic. This stuff is from a local magazine and it's not glossy, so it's ready to go. We can use it in our collage making and our art making, but you can also use glossy magazines. I also save little bits of plastic packaging. And what do we have in this bag? I have no idea. Book pages, again, this was a discarded book that I got from the North Branch Halifax Library, and I literally just smeared some paint on it. The text on the page is in Chinese, and it just gives a lot of really lovely texture. And tissue paper, again, this is magazine paper that I've slapped some paint on. And another gift bag, more paper bags, envelopes. I love using envelopes, and I really like using envelopes with windows in them because you can have a little flip through in your journal. And we've got plain old photocopy paper, some colored craft paper. This is some leftover homework paper for teaching kids how to write cursive, an old calendar. You get the idea. Anything will do. Maybe some pages from a coloring book that you never used, one of those meditation coloring books that were all the rage a couple years ago. Oh, and here's a page from a very damaged House at Pooh Corner, Winnie the Pooh, and more magazines. So there you go. I hope that you can take a couple of minutes to just grab some papers at home, and then we can start making art with them. Now, the first thing you're probably thinking is that you see colorful things on the front of the table. I've just shown you a bunch of really boring, drab papers, and you're thinking, how do I turn that into art? So we are going to make some collage papers. One of the things we're going to do today is we're going to do an art practice that is about healing your heart. But before we really get into that, we want to just make some pretty papers and we want to get our hands dirty. We want to have fun. We're going to tap into that inner child that I was talking about before. So if everybody's ready, we will start to make some heart art. The first thing you want to do is find a piece of paper to make your artwork on. Tara has given me a few sheets of this nice, big, heavyweight white paper. Anything will do. I could also use this brown paper bag, which I may just do. If you have any colored pretty papers at home as well, some sort of craft papers or gift wrap, as I mentioned, anything that's got a little pattern on it. I've got a little selection of papers here to give you an idea. If you don't feel like getting messy with paints and markers and all that stuff, you could just grab some craft papers. Anything that has little patterns on it will do. If you stop by Reachability and talk to Tara, I think she may have a stash of these papers. She could probably get some for you. And I've even cut some into hearts already, some little book hearts. These are from a Peter Pan book that was falling apart. I don't rip up good books. I only tear apart books that are already falling apart. For anybody at home who's gasping at the thought of destroying a book. So yeah, some colored pretty papers are great if you have them, but if you don't have them, we are going to make some. So I'm gonna grab a few more sheets of paper from here, and I've got my brown paper bag, and we are going to talk about some of the techniques for getting paint on the paper. The very first thing I would like to show you is using a gift card or any sort of a plastic card. These were, I have no idea what these were. I can't tell, there's so much paint on them. But it's just a little plastic gift card there. Tara's got one from Walmart, I think, and Jessica should have a couple on her page. Oh, they're in your little yellow cup there, Jess. And we're gonna use these to put some paint on the paper, really super quick and dirty. Don't think about this too much. I'm just gonna grab some paint. I've got some acrylic paints here, and I also have some dollar store craft paints. Those will work beautifully. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I am going to just put a little dot of paint on my piece of paper. And I'm gonna take one of these plastic cards and use it like a spatula and just start to smear the paint around on the page. How's that working for you, Jess?
Good.
Good? Yeah? Okay. So I've got a little bit of purple here, and I want some more color, so I'm going to grab some red. I think this is red, yeah. And just put these together. Part of the fun with this type of art making, art journaling, or you could just call it mixed media art at this point, because we're not working in an art journal. We're just grabbing whatever's at hand and playing with it. It's really open to exploration. See, I don't really have any idea what's gonna happen when I put the red and the black together, but or the red and the purple, but it's kind of created a little bit of black in the middle. Now, this doesn't look like much, but it's color and texture, and we can cut it up to make collage and turn it into something really beautiful. Another thing I love to use, and I'm sorry, but Tara and Jess, you don't have this on your tables, but you're welcome to come and grab a baby wipe if you like. I do not have a baby, but I have a lot of baby wipes in my house, let me tell you. Oh, there goes my bin. That's okay, we'll pick that up later. I am going to grab another color of craft paint. I got some hot pink this time. And I will take my baby wipe and just sort of bunch it up into a ball, and I'm gonna start to move the paint around the page. Oh, look at that, when the pink and the red mix, absolutely gorgeous. So this is also super economical. I mean, it's obviously quite easy. For anybody who has difficulty holding a paintbrush, holding a pen, marker, if dexterity is an issue, this is a great way to just quickly get some color on the page. And I hardly used any paint at all. And you can see most of my piece of paper is all pink now. I think if I grab this journal here, I've got an example. Yeah, this spread that I did is all done with baby wipes in the background and then a little bit of simple collage. One of the things that people find challenging when they first start making art is that fear of the blank page. Nobody likes to go out and spend $10, $15, $20, whatever you spend, even if you spend $3 on a journal or a sketchbook, and you sit down and it's in front of you and you think, oh no, I'm gonna ruin it. Once I put something in here, it's just, I'm not gonna like it and I'm gonna ruin it. As much as you can, I would love for you to park that idea at the door. One of the reasons I love art journaling is because it really is, as I said before, whatever you want it to be. But there are also absolutely no rules. Anything goes. This is not a NASCAD class. This is not Art Theory 101. This is having fun. This is making art for your heart. This is play. So there are no rules. If you want to try something, try it. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. You had the experience. You tried something new. Hey, move on. Try something else. Maybe you want to paint over it. Maybe you just want to tear it up and turn it into collage. I do that a lot. I will take a picture or a painting or something that I have drawn, and if I don't love it, I will cut it up and use it in another piece of artwork. This is a handmade sticker that I made from one of my collage pages. I love to just grab a bin of paper, tear up little strips, glue them down, and this little woman's face was a face I drew. Actually, I painted her about 4 or 5 years ago, and I never really loved her. Her face was very asymmetrical. I cut it in half. I love the two halves of her face. They're just so much fun to play with, a half a face. Here's some lips from another face that just didn't quite work out. I didn't love the way her eyes were in the picture, but boy, do I love that big red mouth. So I cut that out and put it in my collage. So as much as you can, try not to get hung up if you don't love the very first thing you see on the page. It's about the experience, it's about the journey. And really, if you've decided to sit down and join us this morning from home, or if you're watching this later on, this will live on the BAAFF YouTube for a while. Just the fact that you're giving yourself this time, that you have decided to spend a little time on yourself, on your inner child, tending to your heart, tending to your thoughts and feelings. That's a gift to yourself that you should honor. And I really hope that this type of art practice helps you find that happy place in your day. So we've used baby wipes. We have used a little card to swipe color. There's a whole bunch of other ways that you can start to get color on the page for collage. I think everybody has some watercolors on their desks. I'm just gonna grab my little watercolor palette here and I'm gonna put some water in on 2 colors. And watercolors are something, again, that a lot of people are sort of like, oh, they're tricky, they're complicated. They don't have to be. It can just be about fun. I'm gonna get a little bit of blue here on my brush and I'm just gonna splatter it and get some fun dots on here that I can use in my collage later. One of the things that I learned a couple of years ago, and I often forget, is that tapping instead of flicking will give you finer dots, and yeah, you get a little bit more control, I guess. Yeah. And now I'm gonna add some purple. And you can see I just broke one of the rules. People always say never stick a dirty brush into another paint color, but that's a rule, so I'm going to ignore it and splatter some purple in here with my blue, and now I've got some nice dots. Another thing, I never like to waste paint, so whatever's on the brush, I am just going to squeeze that out onto the page. And now my blue and my purple are mixing, which is lovely. A lot of the fun of art journaling is, as I say, that exploration and experimentation. Especially if you haven't done this before, if you haven't played with these art supplies. it's just kind of fun to see what happens and not worry about it. One of the main reasons I suggested that you dig through your recycling bin at home and find paper that is, inexpensive and being reused is so that it's not precious. We don't want to think that any of our supplies are so precious that we can't use them. A lot of my friends who are in the art journaling community, we often joke about the fact that we will hoard special papers. There's that napkin you got at a cocktail party a few years ago, or a postcard that somebody sent you, and it's so beautiful that you don't want to cut it up and use it. Please do. It took me a while to get over that hump myself, but just use what you have. Use the supplies you have. Use the things you can find at home. Now, before we paint any more on our collage papers, I'm going to pull out my little basket of goodies here and give you some more ideas for the types of supplies that you can find at home that are not typical art supplies. I have a toothbrush, a very dirty toothbrush because it has not been used for teeth in a long time. This is another way that you can get sprinkles of paint on your paper. I'm going to go back to my pink sheet here, and I'm just going to flick the toothbrush towards myself. And it's probably hard to see on camera, but there's a very fine mist of paint there now. I could also just take the toothbrush and smush it on my page. There's not much paint there, so I'm not getting much transfer, but I can see that it would do something for me later if I wanted. I also have this weird little silicone spatula, which is meant for, I guess, basting your items before you put them on the barbecue grill. I can see mine's covered in gold paint, not barbecue sauce, because this is wonderful for flicking or for just loosely flipping paint around the page. Now, obviously, kids at home, ask your parents before you go grabbing things from the kitchen to put paint all over them, because the paint will probably not come off. Hair comb, cheap little hair comb. You can get a pack of 6 or 7. I just put purple ink in my hair, everyone. And these are great too. If we take some acrylic paint again, where are my acrylics? I'm gonna grab this blue. And I think there's a comb, maybe. Does one of you have a comb over there on your table?
Yeah, Jess does, yep.
I just put a little bit of acrylic paint on my page, and I'm gonna take one of these plastic cards again and just spread it out thinly. Or not thinly, spread it out gently so there's still sort of a good thickness of paint on the page. And now I can take the comb and just stripe it through, and all of a sudden I have this lovely texture and the gradients of light between the light blue and the dark blue. And I will not put this comb in my hair again. Got another comb, big wide tooth one, fun for just scratching through a bunch of paint, making some lines. And then we have a little pie plate cup. You could dip this into some paint. If I had I do have some palette paper. Let's do that. We can make all sorts of different shapes, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of paint. I don't want green. I'm gonna put some purple paint down here on my paper. I think you guys have some of this scrap paper as well. And I see that Tara has just picked up one of my favorite little tools, the piece of a toilet paper roll. I had a full toilet paper roll, but I think it's one of the things that fell on the floor.
It's just shiny paper.
If you take a little strip of cardboard and cut it off a toilet paper roll, you can then just boop, poke down the top, and all of a sudden I have a little heart shape. So I'm gonna go back to my pie plate for a sec, and I'm just gonna run my little pie tart cup through the paint. I'm gonna turn this in circles around on the page so that I get paint all over the pie plate, and I'm just going to stamp it. So I'm not getting a full circle, which is totally A-okay with me. No rules. Nobody said I had to make a full circle. And yeah, you can just make patterns and shapes. Now I'm gonna take my little paper heart and see if I can have some fun with this. If I smush it into the paint, I might not have enough paint here on this piece of paper, but we'll give it a try. And you can use it like a little stamp to make little hearts. Okay, that one's not working beautifully because I didn't have enough paint, but we'll come back and try it later. And I know I did it successfully the other day. There's an example from home where I made these little hearts using my paper towel roll, toilet paper roll. So what else have I got in my little box of goodies? This is a Bun Maker. Does anybody know what a Bun Maker is? For putting in your hair. Obviously, this one's not been in anybody's hair anytime recently, because you can see it's coated in paint. It's very similar in texture to those scrubby pads you use for the kitchen sink as well, so those are good. And you can make all sorts of beautiful texture with this. I'm gonna rub it through the little bit of paint I have left there, see if I can pick some paint up. Yes, it creates almost like this little snowy effect of speckled bits of paint on the page. So these are just random things I'm showing you to give you a sense of how you can make different designs and patterns on your paper at home. I'm gonna clear away a little bit of space here and get some more paint going so I can show you some more of the goodies I have here in my little bin. There's so many things you can find around the house to make art with. And it's a good idea if you keep them separate from the things that you use in your kitchen. I keep this little bin at home so I know what's an art supply and what's not. This right now that I'm playing with is a lid from a vitamin bottle, and I'm just running it through some red paint so that I can make some red circles on my page here now. I'm gonna sort of overlap them with the messy purple circles I made earlier and just print some different circles and shapes and patterns on the page. And then I've got a lid from a water bottle, I think. Make some smaller circles and just pop those down on the page. I've also got little bits of plastic here that would have been packaging probably from something. And if you have any pinking shears or scalloped scissors, any scissors with any kind of fancy design, you can cut those into the plastic and also use that to scrape into the paint. And I've got some little plastic toy bits. I don't even know where those are from, but they're also great for scraping through the paint. You can see, much like the comb, you can get lines through things. So that's a few different objects you can find around the house for painting with. Also these makeup sponges, or even kitchen sponges, but I find makeup sponges are the best. They're those little latex sponges, and you can put the paint right on the sponge and then just pat it down onto your page. And again, we're just aiming to get some color down on these pieces of white paper and create some different visual textures and just having fun. I don't know about you all, but I'm starting to get an awful lot of paint on my hands, and that makes me very happy. Quickest way to tap into your inner child, I tell you, is cover your hands in paint. And then if you're like me, end up with some of it on your face as well. What else do I have in my little bag of tricks? I have a takeout spoon, which nowadays are often wooden, but plastic ones work as well. Tongue depressor from the doctor. A coffee stir stick already covered in paint. Here's the little paper heart I used the other day to make those pink hearts I showed you. And wine corks. Corks from wine are fabulous for making texture. And let's grab another color of paint here. I'm gonna take some of this burnt umber. It's gonna be a deep brown, which isn't necessarily going to go with the other colors that I'm playing with, but that's okay, because I am playing and I'm just trying different things. So I've just grabbed one of my corks, and this is just a regular cork from a bottle, nothing fancy. But this one, I took my utility knife and I carved out a little bit of the cork so I have a smaller little circle. Tara, I see you looking around, wishing you had a cork. Would you like to use this?
No,
cork?
I'm looking at the eraser of my pencil.
Oh yes, the eraser
version
of the pencil is perfect. Yep. Also, anything that you don't care if you get paint on it, just use it as a stamp. Yeah, I like that idea, using the eraser, because I use erasers to make stamps, but I've never done that. these little freebie pencils that you get, well, you get them when you vote now. And I used to get them from IKEA. They are also great for just scratching through the paint, or you know what, like just scribbling. When was the last time you scribbled? And scribbling can create all sorts of beautiful texture, beautiful lines. Often when I am art journaling, if I sit down and I have a lot of, oh, I'm scratching my microphone. I sit down and I have a lot of feelings on my mind and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with my art. Sometimes I will write about it before I actually start creating any art. And one of my favorite techniques for really getting out difficult feelings is what I call underwriting. And I will write right across the page as quickly and as messily as I can. I don't worry about punctuation. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry about grammar. Nobody is ever going to read this. And even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to. Because what I do is I write across the page, you know, the normal way that we usually write, going from left to right, and then I will rotate my page and write right over top of what I just wrote. And then I rotate my page and I write right over top. So eventually all the words are just a big tangled mess, but you end up with this really beautiful texture underneath. And then you can cover it up with collage or paint. This page here, paper, scissors, glue. I did this. Sometimes I date my work, sometimes I don't, but this one was on October 28th on 2018. And I don't remember all the specifics of that day, but it was a really, really bad day. And I had a lot of upset, hurt, angry feelings. And I put them all down on the page. And then I covered it up with this collage so you would never know. I remember, because it really helped me that day, to just get it out, but never worry about anybody else ever reading it, because I covered it all up. So that's a great thing to do, scribbling or just writing, whatever you feel like. I have a few other goodies in here. This is another kitchen spongy scrubber thing. You can do the same sort of thing that I did with the hair bun. And we'll just put all this stuff back in here. This is a bit of packaging. Again, it's just a paper tube, would make a wonderful round stamp, but I've already got lots of round stamps on my page, so I don't need that. I'm just gonna put this aside because I have too much on my table. And what else? How else can we make collage papers? I mentioned these collage paper stickers, and you can see that it's literally just torn scraps of paper glued together. If you have a bunch of patterned papers, where did mine go? It's really quite simple to take a few pieces of paper and tear them into strips or chunks. And then when you rearrange them and glue them down on the page, especially if you get two colors going, you can get some really, really interesting variations and colors and just something new. This is a great way to use up stuff that you're not super fond of. If you made something or you were trying to create a certain color in your painting and it just didn't really work out, you can tear it up and use it for collage. Now, it probably looks like I am just very quickly and randomly gluing down torn pieces of paper without thinking about it at all. And you know what? That's because that's exactly what I'm doing. I am not thinking about it. I am just having fun, getting glue all over my fingers now to go with all that paint that's on my hands already. And I'm gonna take a little bit of tissue paper. Tissue paper is really fun to use in collage. I will caution you that it can tear easily. But again, doing something like collage, what I'm doing here, and because I'm not worrying about cutting straight lines or anything like that, I'm just grabbing, tearing, and gluing. Another great thing to do if you have any issues with your hands or with dexterity. I suffer from carpal tunnel syndrome, and a lot of times I just can't even feel my fingers. They're just pins and needles. But it helps to move my hands at the same time. So I will do something like this on those days and just grab, tear, and glue. It's also an opportunity to reflect and think about what's going on. Normally, when I'm doing this portion of my art making, I would not be talking nonstop. I would maybe put on some nice music, breathe, relax, make sure to roll out my shoulders, stretch my neck, make sure that I'm really comfortable, and just sort of check in with myself. See how I'm feeling, both physically and mentally. And just listen to, see, right now I can hear Jessica tearing the paper, and to me that is such a beautiful, calming sound. Tearing paper is one of those things that sort of almost feels a little bit naughty or a little bit taboo, like, you know, you're not supposed to rip things up. And maybe that's why it's so satisfying. Another thing you can do to make collage papers is take washi tape. I don't know if you're all familiar with washi tape, but it's that pretty, colorful, patterned paper that you see cropping up in all the stationery stores and at craft supply stores and at the dollar store. And it's super fun and super quick, easy way to add a little bit of color. I'm trying to find the end on this tape now. I may or may not be successful. This one just has little tiny polka dots and flecks of gold. And I already put down a piece of tape that was just orange and white polka dots. And if I take a few strips of this and I layer them together, and then we're just gonna have, again, another little bit of piece of paper that I can cut up later to add a pop of orange and gold to my artwork. And it's just as simple as that. I don't worry about scissors, I don't worry about straight lines, I don't worry if things overlap a little bit. I'm just creating a little bit of color and texture there on my paper. And another way that you can make texture and collage papers is by rubbing a transfer. And what I mean by that is taking something that's textured. This is the Aroma Fresh seal on a can of coffee. And it's just this textured, flexible tin foil. And you can put it underneath a piece of paper. I know I have an example here, but I may not be able to find it. So I will just illustrate for you. Grab some crayons. Crayons are best. I was going to say crayons or something else. A pencil, colored pencils would also work for this. But if you rub over top of the coffee seal, whatever you want to call that thing, the packaging, and just rub over top, then I'm getting this lovely textured pattern and some pretty pink on my page. You can also do the same thing with those little mesh bags that the garlic comes in at the grocery store, or maybe the ginger sometimes. The onion bags work as well, but I find these little garlic bags are the best. They've got a lot of nice texture. Mine are coated in paint, but normally these would be white. That might make it easier for you to recognize what I'm talking about. And again, I can just scribble over top of it. And now I have this awesome spotty grid color or grid pattern coming out on my page. I'm gonna grab a little bit of purple crayon here too, because I know I was using the purple paints before, and I may want to use pink and purple in my final art piece. In terms of colors that you're playing with and stuff, just grab what you like, grab what you feel like, have fun with it. And look, speaking of recycled paper, there's my picture. These are notes from a reachability workshop I did many months ago with Krista. And these were my draft notes that I obviously just stuck into a pile of craft papers at home. That's a happy coincidence. Here's another technique for getting some pattern and some paper down on your collage papers. This I used an old foam roller, those foam rollers that you use for painting at home. And it only sort of picks up half the paint and only puts down half the paint, so you end up with this spotty mottled texture, which I love. I went in with some colored pencils and just wrote XOXOXO and sort of scribbled on it. So I've got a little pattern there. This one, I made these stripes from those coffee sleeves, the cardboard sleeves that come around your coffee cup that are all textured on the inside. You just tear one open and then dip it into some acrylic or craft paint, and you'll get these lovely little stripies. This is made from a rubber stamp, and it's actually a homemade rubber stamp that I made. If you don't have any stamps at home, you can very easily make your own. I have a whole bunch at home, but I brought this gigantic one to show you because it's the easiest one to show on camera. This is a piece of cardboard from a box and some of that little craft foam that you can get at just about everywhere. The dollar store, Michael's, whatever. And I cut some loose circles into it, glued it down onto the cardboard, and now I have this jumbo stamp. I could take my paintbrush and put a bit of paint on each of these dots and just press it down, and I would have a little polka dot background to play with. I have some more here. This is a piece of magazine paper that I dragged a comb through some craft paint, and this time I wiggled the comb through, so you can see a little bit of texture there. Oh, here's my metal coffee can scratching that I did before, and crayon over a garlic bag. And then this is just an index card with a tiny little heart that I cut out, and I simply used an ink pad, and I stamped ink all around it. And now if I want to, I can just remove the little heart, and I have the impression of a heart in the center there. So really, whatever you have to make color with, whether it's rubber stamps, crayons, colored pencils, watercolor paints, craft paint, just about anything goes. And we want to, oh, I mixed up my new collage papers with my samples. We'll put these over here. Okay. So any way you can to get some color down on the page. I now have 2 pieces of paper that have some color and texture on them, and I can see that Jess and Tara are working away, putting color and texture on their pages. So I'm going to just set these aside for a moment so that we can get into them a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit more about what I would normally be doing during this phase. I encourage you to continue playing at home, smear some paint around with your fingers. In fact, I'm going to do that myself right now as I chat. This is a wonderful little watercolor crayon here, which you can just smear down on the page. So as you're sifting through these papers, as you're maybe flipping through a magazine or a pile of last year's gift wrap, and you're thinking about what kind of colors and papers you'd like to play with today, or maybe you're finger painting, or you're sitting with an old toothbrush flicking paint on the paper to see what happens, this is a really good opportunity to just think about what the last 2 years has meant for you. The pandemic has contributed to a lot of feelings of pain, loss, grief, nervousness, fear, struggling, you name it. Everybody has felt some degree of uncomfortableness in the last couple of years. And for a lot of people, this is the first time when we were on lockdown, that people really were sitting at home alone with not much else to do to think about how you're feeling. And sometimes it's an awful lot to process. And a lot of times we really judge ourselves in the way that we think. You may think that your challenges are not as worthy of the time as somebody else's. Maybe you know someone, or maybe somebody in your family, was really struggling with health issues, or maybe there was some other loss in the family, and you might think, oh, the only really bad thing that happened to me in the last few months was that I couldn't have my birthday party and I had to do it over Zoom, or I couldn't go to that thing at school that I was really wanting to, or I'm missing seeing everybody at work because we're all segregated and separated now. Whatever it is, that's how you feel, and how you feel is valid. You should really try as much as you can not to compare your struggles to somebody else's. Because the bottom line is, if something is weighing on your heart, weighing on your mind, that's valid, and you should honor that by just sitting with it and thinking about it a little bit. But I recognize that that can also be uncomfortable. So try not to judge yourself, try not to judge your thoughts and feelings. And the best tip that I have for that is to speak to yourself in the same voice that you would use with a friend or a loved one, maybe a cherished family member. I can be really hard on myself sometimes. I can be quite self-critical. I would never, ever, ever speak to my husband or my mother the way that my inner voice speaks to myself. So one of the things that I try to practice is to be gentle and forgiving with myself, and accepting that this is where I am right now. This is what's happening right now with me. There's all kinds of other things happening around me in the world. I tend to be empathetic, and I think about other people's pain and suffering. But I really would like to invite you to spend this time just being kind to yourself, talking to yourself with that same soft, encouraging voice that you would use with one of your best friends. Whatever you're feeling, just allow yourself to feel it. And I would give yourself 5 or 10 minutes to sort of play. As you're thinking about that, I'm going to add a little bit of water here to that watercolor crayon that I put down. And I'm just going to smush it around with my fingers. And I'm going to think about how that feels. When was the last time that you actually stuck your fingers in a bunch of paint and just thought about how it feels? It feels cold, it feels slippery, almost a little bit, I don't want to say greasy, but oily. And you can see that adding water has changed what's happened in the page. And it just feels good to get your hands in there. There's been a lot of actually research and scientific studies about the benefits of working with your hands, and how there's a real connection between your hands, your brain, your heart. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a registered art therapist, but I can tell you from my own anecdotal data and from the hundreds of art journaling friends I have in the community that this works. This can bring you a real sense of peace and calm and clarity, much like baking. A lot of people love to bake. I love to bake too, but oddly enough, and I love to cook. Since I started art journaling, I don't do as much of that because I think it taps into the same part of my brain and my heart. It's sort of that creative freedom. Now, I'd love to be able to do both at the same time and sit down to a beautiful meal and some hot brownies when I'm done painting, but I will often forego that and stick with the art. Excuse me while I have some more coffee. So now that we have some papers here, we are going to start an exercise that I call heart art. And I'm going to choose a separate piece of paper to use to create my art on. You can choose something that's patterned, or you could take just a big plain piece of white paper. I don't think I have any plain white left now. Oh, there's a piece. And we are going to take our painted collage papers and make some paper hearts. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that you can make a paper heart. If you have scissors, we can cut some hearts. And you can also tear paper with your hands. That can be a little challenging for some folks, but you can see here, I've cut out some simple little hearts, and I'm going to show you a few examples. You remember a few minutes ago when I was striping the washi tape down on a piece of paper? These are bits of paper that I did collage on this one and washi tape strips on this one. And then I just cut out a little heart. And where'd the heart go from this one? There we go, a little collage heart. One of the easiest ways for making a heart is to take a piece of paper and fold it in half and draw half of a heart. Now, you'd think I would have a pencil or a pen, but I'm going to grab a crayon and just draw half of the heart shape on my little piece of paper, and grab some scissors here. I'm just doing this one as an example, but I'm going to do some other ones in a moment. But I'm pretty sure most of us have done this for making a little heart at some point in the past. Maybe not for a very long time, maybe when you were a child. This is one that I tore, and it's not perfect. It's kind of round and jagged, but you know what? A lot of the times, that's how my feelings are, a little jagged, so it's okay. And again, I always save this piece, the piece that you've cut it out from, because then you've got something else that you can play with in your art. So in terms of making hearts, again, I've got way too much stuff around me. You can trace a heart. If you have a heart already, maybe you got something, a piece of foamy from your craft stash, or maybe you have a piece of cardboard that's already cut into a heart. You can simply trace it. And again, this is going to give me more pattern on my collage paper. So I've traced the heart here, and I could very easily go in and cut that one out if I wanted to. Another way to make a heart, I think if you look on your tables, Jessica and Tara, you will have some little paper circles. And if you don't have a paper circle already cut at home, you can go into your stash of earlier round shapes and just trace out a circle and cut it out. And then we're going to take the circle and cut it in half and turn it into a heart by making a little snip up and down. And I probably should have had a bigger circle to show you how I did that, but I think it's, oh, and I didn't quite get a point at the bottom, but that's okay. You can just go in. Once you've got the basic shape, you can turn it into a heart pretty quick. Oh, look what I did. It's a heart with a little fang tooth at the bottom. So now that we've talked about different ways that you can make some hearts, I'm going to ask you to grab the papers that we were adding paint and collage to and cut out a few hearts. What you want to do is cut out one heart that is a lot bigger than the others. We're going to aim to have anywhere from 3 to 5 of these paper hearts, which we are going to use in a piece of art that we're going to make together very soon. And I'm just going to take my big piece here and cut it up so that I can fold it in half, because it really, for me, folding in half and cutting around is the easiest way to make hearts. And I'm not being too fussy or precious about which parts of my paper collage I'm using. See, okay, to me, this is a great example. This piece of paper that I smushed and moved paint around, and I just, you saw me do it. I wasn't putting a lot of thought into it, but look how cute this heart is. It's got little bits of red, little bits of purple. It's got the pink. It's got all these textures. All of a sudden, right now, I've just made something that makes me happy. It gives you that little endorphin boost. So let's cut out some more hearts. I've got 2, I would call these sort of medium size. So I'm going to go for a bigger heart now and try to capture some of the other colors that I have on my page. And if anybody is following along and you're saying, oh, I'm not really into hearts, I'm not into all that Valentine's lovey-dovey stuff, I'm just not feeling it right now, cut some circles, no rules. I'm using hearts because they signify some of the feelings and things we're going to be talking about and working through, but If you're not a heart person at all, I get it. I'm not a big smiley face person. I'm a smiley faced person, but I'm not a big fan of using the little smiley face, symbol. So whatever feels good to you. If you want to cut out a bunch of triangles, if you want to tear random messy shapes, if you want to make perfectly symmetrical squares, you do what feels good for you. So here I've got some more hearts, and again, I'm just loving the way my collage papers have added all these little bits of color. That heart's a little bit rounder than the others, so I'm just gonna give it a little trim. And this is just so that I make it pleasing to my eye. Whatever works for you. So what do I have? I've got 3 mediums, 1 big heart. I'm gonna go to my second little piece of collage paper here and cut out a couple of really small hearts. This is where, if you have some circles cut out already, that can be helpful for making hearts. And I may or may not use all of these hearts in my collage, in my art piece. And I know I said we were gonna make a minimum of 3, but up to 5. Now I'm gonna change my mind and say, make as many little hearts as you want, because if you don't use them in this piece, you can use them in all sorts of other ways. We've got the holidays coming around. Maybe you want to make some little handmade ornaments to hang on a Christmas tree, or you want to make somebody a card or send somebody a thank you note for that beautiful Hanukkah brunch you had with all the latkes this weekend. Whatever you're thinking and feeling, you can never have too many little paper hearts and shapes around as far as I'm concerned. And I'm also thinking about my heart. I'm thinking about how I feel and thinking about some of the things that were challenging over the last couple of years, and some of the things also that brought me joy. There's been some bright moments, lots of happy moments, lots of time with family. So I'm going to clear up a little bit of my mess here now. And I think now would be a great time for everybody to have a little bit of a break, a little bit of a stretch. If you're sitting and you want to stand, or if you're comfortable in your chair and you just want to sort of stretch out your muscles a little bit and take a deep breath, and we will come back in just a couple of minutes and start to turn all this mess into a piece of artwork that you can be happy with and content and satisfied. Yeah. And if you don't want to get up and take a break, then just keep cutting hearts, keep painting hearts, keep doing whatever feels good to you, and I will join you back here in just a couple of minutes. We all set? Hey folks, we are back. And we are, oh, I still have my mask on because I was wandering around the building. Okay. Hello and welcome back. I hope you all have messy hands and open hearts, because now we are going to get into our feelings a little bit. So we all have our little paper hearts that we just cut up. And hello, we had a little visitor, a little delivery. So we've got some hearts here, and I want you to grab a pen or a pencil if you are comfortable with writing. You could also grab a crayon, anything you want. And we're going to spend a few quiet moments thinking about the last 2 years. And I really want you to think about what has been difficult, what has challenged you, what has maybe made you feel sad or frustrated. And and just give yourself some time to say, you know what, that's okay. It's okay that I feel kind of crappy. It's okay that I maybe spent a few more days sleeping in than I should have, or watched Netflix for 14 hours straight last weekend because it was all I had the energy for. That's cool. That's fine. We are in unprecedented times, and it's a really good time to give yourself a little bit of breathing room, give yourself some excuses for things, but just think about how you feel. And I want you to take your hearts and flip them upside down onto the blank side, or if they're anything like mine, they're the paint splattered sides. And nobody's ever going to see this. Nobody's going to see what you write here. But if you're comfortable, I invite you to write down some things on the back of these hearts that you miss, or things that you're longing for, or things that maybe stood out as a rough day, a rough period, anything at all that you have struggled with over the last couple of years. And you know what? This doesn't have to be pandemic specific. This can be specific to your life. This can be specific to a certain period in your life. Whatever it is that you're struggling with. The first time I did an art practice like this one, a healing heart practice, was with a dear friend of mine, Sarah Rondon. She's a wonderful artist, and she does a Healing Hearts video as well. And that day we wrote about the negative self-talk, that voice in our heads, the inner critic that says you can't do this or you're not good enough at that. Maybe you don't have an inner critic so much as you have an actual critic in your life. Maybe there's somebody that you have a relationship with at work, at school, at home, that's really tough. And it stirs up a lot of those tangled kind of feelings. Maybe you want to spend the next few minutes thinking about that. Whatever it is you focus on, I want you to just put a few words on the back of your hearts. You can write full sentences. You can write just a single word. You can write it legibly. You can write it as a scribble. Maybe you are so frustrated and tired that all you want to do is just scribble it out. You can see I'm purposely making a face, and I'm just pushing this crayon as hard as I possibly can. But maybe you aren't even comfortable with that. Maybe you don't want to write anything down at all, or maybe writing is difficult for you. If that's the case, you can whisper to yourself. You can think in your head. One of the things that's been really challenging for me is being separated from a lot of my family members who don't live here, and we haven't been able to travel. And, you know, you go a year and a half without seeing your sister, and it's hard. So I could write that down on the back of my heart. I can write that I miss my sister and my niece and my nephew, because they don't live here. They live in Ottawa. So I've written that on the heart. I could also just think about it or whisper it into my heart. I miss my sister, whatever you're comfortable with. So we will just spend a few minutes quietly so that you can think about a few things that you've missed and jot them on the back of your hearts. These can be big, big, big things that really hurt, or it can be little things. Like I love to go to a coffee shop and just sit at a coffee shop and take my pencil case and maybe a little thing of watercolors and sit and make art in a coffee shop or at the library. I love to do that, and that's been really difficult and challenging. You know, I can do it a little bit more now with masking and all that kind of stuff, but it still doesn't feel quite the same. So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing again with total abandon and not a care in the world, not worrying about who's sitting beside me and all that stuff, and not worrying about germs and COVID. So I'm gonna write down that I miss my artist dates. That's what I call it, an artist date, when I take myself to a coffee shop or somewhere just to make some art. I recently went on my first artist date in about a year and a half, and I went to Wonderneath. If anybody knows about the Wonderneath Art Studio in North End, Halifax, it is amazing. It's a beautiful, magical place. You should check it out. Now, I haven't written anything on my biggest heart yet. I'm saving my biggest heart for my biggest challenge. What have I missed the most? What's hurt the most in the last couple of years? I can think of a few things. I'm not going to share them out loud on camera. I'm just going to write a few notes to myself here. And I encourage you to do the same. If you're doing this at home, you may like to put some music on or have some background sounds, whatever brings you comfort. And you can write this however you like. And now I've got my little hearts. I'll give you all a couple of minutes to write, and I will drink coffee. The big thing I want you to think about right now is that there is no judgment. There's no right, no wrong. You're just doing this for yourself. And you may end up creating something that you want to share with others. You may end up creating something that you want to stick on your fridge and show it to the world. You may make something that you just want to keep private and personal for yourself. But I promise you that nobody will ever see what you wrote on the back of these hearts. It will be pretty much impossible for them to do that. So, I think that now would be a really good time to do something fun and to get our creative juices flowing. We're gonna take our little hearts and just put them aside for a moment. And I want to walk you all through a very quick exercise on mark making. Mark making is, I've lost my piece of paper, folks, hang on. Here we go. This is what my desk looks like at home, times 10. All this stuff you see, it is just wild, all the stuff I have in my art room at home. Very messy, but I like it messy. So mark making is doodling, basically. It is taking a pen, a pencil, a paintbrush, your finger, whatever, and making marks on a page. It's really big in art journaling. We don't just slap paint on the page. We like to spend a lot of time just making marks, adding little bits of visual interest to a page. This was an art journal spread that I did a couple of years ago. July 2020, I made this book, and I made it out of a DHL shipping container box. I got a gift from my dear friend and art journaling mentor, Kaylee, in Germany, and it came in this yellow box, so I immediately cut the box up and made it into a journal. And I can tell you that this page was made while I was working on a piece for Reachability. Tova Sherman, the CEO of Reachability, has a wonderful book that she published last year called Win, Win, Win on creating an inclusive workplace. And she invited a bunch of us friends and clients of Reachability to submit artwork. So I was trying to figure out my color palette, and I was playing with the Reachability colors, lots of red and orange and yellow, also the BAAFF colors. And while I was working on that piece, I had my journal open beside me because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to waste any paint. So whenever I had a little extra paint on the paintbrush, I just smeared it onto this page. But back to mark making. This X, these little squares, if you can see them, these lines through the page, they're nothing but doodles. They're just marks, but they add a little something visual to the page, and they also allow me to continue that head, hand, heart connection. So let's do a little exercise. I want you to grab a blank piece of paper. It can be really any size, like photocopy paper, even a piece of loose leaf from a scribbler. We're gonna fold it in half once, and then we're gonna hold it in half again. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this expression, but I just learned it in the last couple of years for 2 different ways to fold things. There's a hot dog fold and a hamburger fold. I can't even say that without laughing. The hot dog fold is when you have the long line like this, and then a hamburger fold is when you're folding the shorter side of the page. Has anybody ever heard that before? No, it's so bizarre, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there we go. So I have folded my piece of paper so that I now have 8 little rectangles. If you don't feel like folding your piece of paper, you could also just take a pen or marker or crayon and draw a grid. The gist of it is that I would like everybody to have 8 little sections on a piece of paper. And I'm gonna grab my phone and I'm going to get the stopwatch going. And what I'm gonna do is I am going to set the timer for 1 minute, and I'm gonna tell you a different type of mark that I want you to make. So far, I've opened my phone and the calculator. Where's the clock? There we go. So we're gonna set the timer for 1 minute, and I'm gonna tell you a mark or a shape, and I want you to, with your pen, I would really like a pen or a pencil. There we go. You can use, whatever kind of pen you have, a ballpoint, a marker. You can use black and white. If you've got a bunch of colored pencils or colored markers nearby, you could use those. And I'm gonna set the timer for 1 minute, and I'm gonna ask you to fill one of these 8 rectangles with a certain shape. Don't worry about it being neat and tidy. Don't worry about it looking the same as somebody else's. Just whatever pops into your head when I say fill it with this shape, fill it with that shape. So let's start with the first square, and I am going to ask you to fill it with squares. Your squares can overlap. They can be big. They can be small. I like to do things in groupings of 3 or 5 or 7. Basically, odd numbers works really well visually, and when you're making art for some reason. You can also connect them and make a chain, but just see how many different little boxes and squares you can make in 1 minute, and whether or not some of them stand out to you as shapes that you find visually appealing. You may want to use these in your mark making later on when we're working on our main art piece. But just like doodling, this is something that immediately connects your hand, your eye, your brain, your heart. It doesn't take a whole lot of thought. And there's no right, there's no wrong. Now again, if anybody has difficulty with dexterity using a pen and paper, you could do this with your finger and some paint, or you could just use your finger in the air and make some shapes. Here I'm making connected squares in my brain, and then I'm gonna put a big square around it. We've got 5 seconds left, and then I am going to ask you to stop and go to stop. Cancel. Nope, we got crickets, everybody. That may have been more than a minute. The timer may have been set for 1:30. I apologize if it was. Now I'm going to ask you to fill up the next one with circles. Again, your circles can be big, small, they can overlap. Just fill the little section with as many circles as you can. And when I say circles, they don't have to connect. You know, if you could get a close-up shot of my page, you'd see that many of my circles actually have tails. I call them tails, but little squirrely bits that don't quite get contained in the circle. And it doesn't look like much at first, but I don't know about you, but for me, as I fill this little piece of paper with all these circles, and they're all connecting and joining now, it's starting to look like something bigger than just a few circles. I can imagine that it's pebbles in the water. Maybe they're the pebbles at my favorite beach, Bayswater Beach, and there's a little stream going through. Or maybe they're bubbles. Maybe it's bubble wrap. Maybe it's bubbles in a glass of soda water. Okay, now we're going to try to cancel that. We did it this time. Good. And stop. Okay, now I didn't quite fill in my whole little thing. That's okay. Again, there's no right or wrong. There's no rules. This is just a way to free up your mind. I think this next one, we're just going to go for 30 seconds. And I am going to ask you to fill your little rectangle with squiggly, swirly lines going across horizontally. Or you know what? Do them vertically if that's what you feel like. Because this is all about doing what you feel like. Now I'm making mine really big and loopy. It kind of looks like I'm doing the letter E in cursive over and over and over again, because that's essentially what I am doing. Okay, 30 seconds goes by fast, but that's good. Did anybody get a chance to fill their little rectangle? Yeah, okay. Let's do the next one with flowers. It can be any type of flower. Remember the little flowers you used to draw as a kid? It's a circle in the middle with some messy petals around it. I also like to make just swirly circles, and mine are going to overlap and be messy. But your circles are your circles. They will look however you like them to look. And again, this is just doodling. Imagine you're back in school and you're listening to the teacher give a lecture, and you need to do something with your hands to be able to pay attention. Okay, and stop. So now we've got half of our page full, and I'm going to turn mine over, flip it over, so I've got my blank rectangles at the top, but you do whatever you like. And I'm going to switch to a crayon, and we are going to go for 30 seconds, scribble. Just scribble. Fill your little thing with scribbles. And I'm actually going to try scribbling with my left hand, also with a different color, because I really find it difficult to scribble with my left hand. And I can see that my left-handed scribbles are really jagged and they have hard edges, whereas my right-handed, because I am right-handed, scribbles are soft and loopy and bubbly. So that's something I can remember. If I want to have a more jagged, rough look, I can go with my non-dominant hand. Okay, we've got 3 more circles left to fill, or 3 more rectangles, I mean. Another 30 seconds, let's fill it with triangles. And they can, again, be any size, any shape triangles. You can overlap and connect. I've kind of got this thing going where I'm putting all my triangles overlapped. It almost looks like a chain. They're connected. I'm going to try stacking some and just doing little groupings of 3 or 5 and see what that looks like. And 30 seconds is up. Okay, next we will do stars. Let's go 30 seconds with stars. And I don't know about you all, but I cannot draw a 5-sided star to save my life. I have mentioned this to several friends who find it quite hilarious. I have followed so many online tutorials and things in books for, here's 5 easy ways to draw a star. I can't do it, folks, and I've given up. That's okay. I do this kind of a star, which is just, an X and another X and overlapped, and there we go. I'm done with stars. We have one rectangle left. And I'm thinking about a dear family member of mine who loves chevron patterns. Do you know what a chevron pattern is? It's when you have those jagged lines.
Zigzags.
Zigzags. Thank you, Tara. Zigzags. Okay, so let's go for 30 seconds of zigzags. And you can make it so that your peaks and valleys line up from one line to the next. Or you can do small. See, I've already made mine. It's no longer a chevron. I'm just doodling little lines and peaks and valleys and filling up my little triangle. Okay, that is 30 seconds. So, how do we all feel after doing this? For me, it sort of breaks me out of what I was doing before. And it reminds me of how simple tools like a pen and a crayon, you can make all sorts of different little marks and shapes that give visual interest. I know for me, I'm looking at this and you could probably tell when I was talking about it, I'm loving these bubbles. They're so fun, the little bubbles. I love the swirls. The stars are good. So, these are things that I may take into the art piece we're about to make, or they're things that I may just take into my art at another time. So we can set this aside. And here's one I did before where I did some squirrely lines. There's some more scribbles, circles with X's in it, evenly lined dots. There's so many different things you can do. Okay, so now that we've done that, I want everybody to bring their hearts back in front of them. And they can be face down, face up, whatever. And I've got a blank piece of paper underneath. And I'm going to ask everybody to trust me at this point. I'm going to ask you to do something that may seem a little bit odd at first, but trust me, we're going to go with it. What I'm going to ask you to do in a minute or so is tear up these pretty little hearts that you've just made. We're going to tear them into a minimum of 2 pieces each, preferably 3 or 4 pieces each. And I'll tell you why. These hearts now contain some of our deepest thoughts, our worries, the things that make us sad or longing for things. And as we tear them up, we're going to quietly give ourselves permission to just let those things go for the moment, or to accept the fact that they are the way they are. And I really want you to think about these things as we're doing it. I know it can be difficult sometimes. It's uncomfortable to sit with your feelings, but just tell yourself it's okay. I've got my biggest heart here, which, as you may remember, I wrote on the back what's been one of the biggest challenges for me in the past year. Broadly speaking, it has to do with health and mental health and all those things. And I'm holding the heart in both of my hands. I can I'll invite you to do this, warm it up a little bit. I can feel the warmth between my hands and the paper, creating a little bit of friction. And I'm going to tell myself, you know what? It's okay that I feel what's written on this heart. It's valid. It is worth my time and attention. And As much as I don't want to sometimes. I accept it for what it is, and I'm going to try really hard not to let it pull me down. And as I tear the heart, I am giving myself permission to do all of that. I'm tearing it slowly. I am breathing out, and I'm just putting this away for now. And it's okay. I'm going to put that one heart that's torn up right there. So go slowly, think about it, breathe. You don't need to tear up your teeny tiny little hearts, but you want to tear up the big one and maybe a couple of your medium-sized ones. And I also encourage you, as you're doing this, to think about happy things or hopeful things. Think about those little moments of joy. I found last year at the beginning of lockdown, a lot of people were talking about all the quiet, simpler things that they were spending time doing. You know, families were at home, not at work. Everybody was baking bread and playing board games and actually enjoying quality time, you know, with whoever was in your household, in your home, or maybe on Zoom with people. So try to think about some of those things that you're grateful for and some of the things that weren't horrible, rotten, awful in the last couple of years. And if you can't do that, I get it. That's okay. If you're tired, if you're frustrated, if you're sad, anxious, depressed, and you have a really difficult time finding those bright spots to focus on, that's okay. Take this time to say to yourself, that's okay. I'm not there right now. Things really stink and I feel rotten and I want to give myself permission to feel rotten some of the time. That's cool. I'm gonna do it. And I'm just gonna pull these little hearts apart and keep your hearts in their own little piles as you tear them up, because if they're like mine and they look similar, you don't want to get them mixed up when we go to put them back together later. I will remind you also during this time to talk to yourself in that friend voice. Be compassionate with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Be forgiving. Another thing you can do is take your hearts and as you tear them, just sort of drop them in front of you. I am dropping that. I'm not holding that anymore. I may pick it up again tomorrow. I may pick it up later in this day, but in this moment, I am not holding that thought. I'm not holding that pain. I'm letting it go. So, we've got some hearts here, and I've just mixed up some of my hearts. There we go. Okay, I've got my little pieces of hearts, and then I still have some smaller hearts that are intact. And I am going to invite you to grab whatever you want to create your little piece of artwork and collage on. We all have blank paper. We also have paper that we painted on earlier. You can certainly feel free to make a background on this page if your surface is blank and you'd like to have a little bit of color in the background. Look at your hearts and think about, okay, what would be a complementary color to go with these, something that looks nice or feels good. I've got a lot of red and pink and purple, and I have a little bit of blue. I have this piece of brown paper. So I am going to go back to my acrylic paints for just a minute. And if you have acrylics or watercolors or whatever you're working with, I'm going to go back to the gift card and the acrylic paint. And I'm just going to put some paint down. I've decided rather than using white paper, I'm going to create my piece of heart art on this bit of paper bag. I don't know about you all, but I love brown paper. There's something about the natural craft brown. And I'm having one of those happy accident moments here because there's texture on the sides of this paper. So some of the techniques I was showing you earlier, like with the coffee can lid and the garlic bag, that's happening right now. I didn't expect it, but I'm getting this little bit of a pattern coming through on the page as I smear blue paint around. Now, again, for those of you watching, it probably looks like I am just smearing paint on an old paper bag with no plan of action at all. And that's because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just smearing the paint down because it feels good. And I see that Tara has some watercolors going on, and I don't like to miss out. I want to mix it up, so I'm going to get into my watercolors again and just add some splatters on here. And again, this doesn't have to be anything fancy or special. We're just creating a surface to put our hearts back together, which is what we're going to do with our little paper hearts in a few moments here. And I'm just going for some blue splatters. I don't know whose job it is to clean this table up when I'm done. I'm going to nominate my old friend Steve, who's working behind the cameras there. He can clean up all the paint on this later on. Okay, now I need to let that dry for just a couple of minutes. And while I set this aside to dry, I'm going to pull my little torn up paper hearts back in front of me on my work surface. I don't think I've mixed them up too badly. And let's just take another minute or so to have a deep breath. I'm starting to think about moving my intention towards those happy, peaceful, joyful thoughts if I can find them. On days when I can't find them, I am reaching into my heart and giving it a hug, giving it some gentle care and attention, and just reminding myself that what I'm doing right now is good for me. It's fun. It feels good. This is not time wasted. This is time spent caring for myself and tapping into my inner child. And I'm just going to breathe that all in and let it go. So, as I mentioned before, no rules, but we are going to put our hearts back together. Now, first, I want you to do it just on your table or your work surface. Now, that first one that I've done is easy peasy. I only tore it into 2 parts, so that one comes back together quite easily. And don't worry about, we're not gluing them together just yet. We will get to that in a moment. Now, I've got my big heart, which has my big feelings on it. And this one, it's a little like a jigsaw puzzle. I don't remember exactly what this looked like before I tore it up because it's covered in all this collage-y goodness and little marks of paint. But there we go. I've got my 4 pieces back together for my big heart. And now we will put together my last torn up heart. Is everybody able to put their hearts together? Oh, Tara has something magical going on. I see little tiny envelopes or something. Very nice. How you doing, Jess? Good. And see, this one is tricky. Okay, there we go. My jigsaw puzzle heart is back together. I don't know, every time I do this, it surprises me that you can just tear something into a few pieces and then struggle to put it back together. So as you're putting your hearts back together, again, just remind yourself that this is self-care, it's healing. You have every right in the world to take this time for yourself. If it means, let's say you're a busy mom, you've got kids running around, sit the kids down with some crayons too and make art together if that's what you have to do. If not, say, you know what, I need a half an hour alone. I'm gonna go do this in the other room. So now we are going to put our hearts back together, and I'm gonna grab my painted background. Let's see if it is dry. Mostly, not quite. So my little blue pink paint splatters, some of them were wet, and now they kind of look like shooting stars because I ran my hand through them, and that's all good. That's cool. So I don't like to be too hasty with my glue. I encourage you to pick up your biggest heart and put it down on top of your painted background or your collaged background or your plain piece of white paper, whatever you have. I recommend not putting it dead center. I would put it off to one side or the other, just slightly off from the halfway point, because we're gonna wanna add in our other hearts and create a little bit of a visual collage and just incorporating your hearts wherever you feel they look nice. And the reason I say don't be so hasty with the glue, you want to play around with this a little bit. My paper is curling, so I'm gonna tape it down to the table. One of the things you will find using found art supplies at home is that depending on what kind of paper you grab, it's gonna react differently to the different mediums or the different art supplies that you put down. If you throw a bunch of watercolor and water onto a piece of loose leaf, it's gonna suck it up like paper towel. It may dry and be something handy to use later, but anyway, my point being that it's okay if the corners curl, it's okay if the paper gets bubbly and watery, because it's all just experimentation. So I know now I'm gonna sit back and look at this and think about where I wanna place things. I know I wanna move this heart up here and my smaller heart down here. And the reason I know that is because it just felt good in the moment. So feel free to move your hearts around. And as you're putting them back together, you're just having a little chat with yourself, maybe inside your head, that this is okay. Sometimes our hearts get broken, but we can mend them. We can stitch them back together. One of the terms that comes to mind right now is one that was really popular in the first year of the pandemic, which is the new normal. And when we talk about the new normal, we talk about how things will kind of go back to how they were, but they won't quite be the same. And this is a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in other ways. And so it's the same but different. So my heart now, it's the same heart, but it's different. It's scarred, if you will. It's whole again, but was shattered technically. And then I'm gonna look at some of the little smaller hearts that I have kicking around, because I may want to add in a few others. As I mentioned before, I like to do things in 3s and 5s. Odd numbers of things on your page will give you a nice balanced look. And if you don't have quite what you need, I have this little heart here in pale pink that I really like, but I wish I had another one. So here I've got another little heart that's cut out of paper, and I'm just going to color it pink if I can find the pink crayon. There we go. And I'm actually going to color it. I just decided this right now. I'm going to do it right on my page, and I'm going to go over the edges of the heart so that I will end up with the sort of shadow of a heart on my page, where you'll be able to see where the crayon or the marker or whatever you want to use does not go through. I don't know if, like me, you were a kid and your teacher ever took you out for art outdoors and you'd go and do tracings of things outside. I used to love to go to the cemetery, of all places, and do rubbings on the gravestones with paper and pencil, and you could pick up those beautiful moldings and images and stuff. You can even just do it on the side of a brick. You can probably find things around your house. Anything that's textured and hard, put a piece of paper down, grab a pencil or a colored crayon, and just scribble over it, and you'll get that texture. So now I've got a little heart here. I've got my little hearts. So just start to move things around into a way that feels good for you. Don't overthink it. Again, there's no right, there's no wrong. And I'm going to start gluing my hearts down onto the page, all the little pieces. And then we're going to connect the hearts and add some little details. We're going to tap into some of the mark making that we did earlier. And one of my favorite things to do as I'm putting my hearts back together is to add some stitches to my heart. Now, I'm not actually going to get out a needle and thread today, but I would be lying if I said I didn't do that quite often. In fact, if I went into my purse behind me in the other room, there is a little kit that I never leave home without, and it's a tin from some mints, some Altoid mints. And in that tin, I have a little tiny art supply set. I've got a mini stapler, I've got tapes, I've got all sorts of pins and clips, I've got pencils, eraser, pencil sharpener, and I also have a needle and thread. So that if I decide that all of a sudden I need to do some stitching on the go when I'm sitting at a coffee shop playing in my journal, I can do that. But what I'm going to do here instead is just imitate stitches. Now I want to glue my other two hearts down. I know roughly where I'm going to put them, but I'm going to search on the mess here for a white pen. I think, Tara, you might have a white pen. Some people have white pens at home, a white crayon.
We have some gel pens, and we have some silver and gold pens.
Yeah, any color that's contrasting, lighter or darker than what your artwork is will work. You could also use a ballpoint pen, a white crayon, liquid paper. If y'all have liquid paper, that's also great to use. And I'm going to draw little lines that kind of look like stitches. They're not showing up very well with the white on the pink, but I'm actually getting little scratches into the paper, which for me works just as well. There we go. You can see over the darker blue, just some little lines that kind of suggest that a lovely, kind, caring nurse stitched my heart back together for me. Now I'm going to glue down my second heart. And it's up to you. You can spend this time thinking and processing what we were talking about and thinking earlier, or you can spend this time just enjoying, feeling the textures of your paper, looking at the different ways that the different pieces of paper play together. This heart, now I'm going to untape my paper from the page for a sec. This heart that I've done, I just tore it in two pieces, and I have intentionally left that line there. It's a little fracture in the heart, and for me, that represents that It's okay. We go through things in life that sometimes leave marks, and they are reminders of our journey and what we've done, and that we're still here, or that we're moving forward, or that we're honoring what happened in the past, whatever it means for you. But I like that. To me, that little fracture is a reminder that things don't have to be perfect. I'm not trying to put this back together so that it looks exactly like how it looked before I tore it up. I've forgotten the word. Maybe somebody else can help me and knows it, but there's a Japanese art technique for mending things, particularly mending teacups and pots, where they will fill the cracks with gold. Instead of trying to hide the crack, and getting the crazy glue out and putting the mug back together and making it look seamless like it was never broken in the first place, you honor the crack and you fill it with gold so that it stands out. You know what that's called, Tara, or you're just familiar
I'm
with it?
familiar with the technique, but I can't remember the...
Anyway, you can Google it. You'll find some beautiful things to look at. Okay. How you doing, Jess? You got some hearts back together there?
Got so many hearts, you wouldn't even know what to do with them, Heidi.
Good.
For some reason, you said you always do everything in odd.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter in the marks that you were telling us to do or in the heart thing. I always end up with an even number. So
That's
I just
great.
forced myself to add an extra one so that it would be off. But every single line.
But see, there you took what I said as a rule, and maybe you don't have to go odd. Odd just works for me. And how are you making out?
Good, I got you one.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to get my third heart. Oh, and I took it apart, and this is the tricky one. Here we are, folks, live on camera. Can I put my heart back together? There, I had it backwards before. I don't know, I was going to say this was my favorite heart of all the ones I made, but I don't know. I really like them all, and I hope that you are happy with the hearts that you are putting together at home, and that you are enjoying this process of gently giving yourself a bit of care and fun. And when we finish with this, I will show you some more art journals of mine and some easy techniques for incorporating this into your life, and also for not spending too much money. I know I mentioned earlier that I made a lot of journals during the pandemic, and I've been making a lot of journals for years, but it almost became a necessity during lockdown. But I really encourage you to make your own journals, dig through your recycling bin, take your old homework from school, and turn it into art, turn it into collage paper, whatever. It just really frees you up when you're using something that's not precious and something that really didn't cost you very much money at all. And if you hate it in the end, if you really don't like it and you never want to look at it again, well, it just came out of the rubbish bin, right? It came out of the recycling. So the only thing you've lost is time and a bit of ink and glue and paint. And I would argue that you haven't lost any time at all, that you've really made good value of your time. So I've got 3 big hearts here. I've got my little doodled heart there. I want to add a few more hearts. And now would also be a great time if you feel like using something other than hearts. Maybe you're not using hearts at all. I mentioned before, maybe you're using squares, circles. You can cut up some little shapes of paper and just add them in. I'm just sort of grouping all my little hearts together. And I think I would also like some circles. This one says Mrs. Darling on it. Sometimes when I cut these things out of books, you pick it up months later, and oftentimes the words really speak to you. Here we go. Happier family are the 2 words I can make out on this scrap of paper. And some of the things that I've been thinking about and journaling about are about family and wishing happiness and health for everyone. So this piece just has to go on here as far as I'm concerned. And I'm gonna do the same with this one. Let's see, blankets. The word blankets is on here. Makes me think of being cozy. The words going away are also on this little scrap of paper. It will be nice as we're able to travel and get out a little bit more to maybe go away. And where am I going to put this circle? So I'm sort of standing back again, looking at my whole piece, and I've got a lot going on here, fair bit here. There's not much happening in this corner, and that's okay for me right now. I am not loving the little doodled heart I did, so yeah, I'm just going to cover that up because that's okay. I don't have to leave anything on my page that I don't love. Maybe I want another heart. And you could also be making 2 or 3 of these things at once. Maybe you don't want to make an art journal piece for yourself or a mixed media piece. Maybe you want to make some cards for friends, or you want to send out some happy mail just to pick up somebody's day and give them a little boost. This would be a great way to make some cards. You know, if I had done this more in the center, I could even fold this and make it into a card. I still could. Yeah. So I also want to invite you, if it's comfortable for you, to add some words to your page. In art journaling, as I mentioned, a lot of times we use words, a lot of times we don't. It really depends on your mood and what you're making. When I make a piece like this that is about embracing my heart and being kind to myself, I sometimes do like to put a statement word or a sentence, something on here that represents this time that I've spent doing it. Healing Hearts comes to mind. Maybe I want to just put the words remember so that I remember this time, or I remember the things that are under the hearts. Maybe the word fragile. Some of you will feel comfortable with your handwriting. Others will not be so keen on their handwriting. Sometimes I will print a bunch of stuff off on the computer. I've got this little piece of paper here, which I can pop on social media later so that you can take a copy and download it if you like. I've just written some phrasing here that could be useful in your art. You could cut these words out and collage them on, or you could copy them. I have printed this out in color. I also have one that I printed out in just black and white on some colored pink paper. And then I wanted to make some of them more personalized. So with this one I went in, it says my time, and I put a piece of washi tape over the photocopy, and I just took a marker and I copied the words my time exactly as they were typed underneath. I could never print it quite that neatly, so when you're tracing over the washi tape, it looks great. Here are the words heart art. Actually, I'm going to use that today. I just went over this with a silver gel pen. I just, again, wrote over the words that were typed on the page. This one, I outlined the word hope with silver, and this I absolutely love. Oh, this is going to work out nicely. The word family with just a bunch of dots around it. I just surrounded it with little dots of gel pen. And they're just little ways to take, you know, a printed word and make it a little more personalized, make it a little bit more your own. You can also go into your magazine stash, your book stash. Flyers that come in the mail are a great source of collage material. I have a whole folder at home just full of words that I've cut out, words and phrases from magazines. If you get into doing collage, mixed media, art journaling, this kind of thing, I can almost guarantee that you'll never look at a magazine or a piece of printed matter the same, because everything starts to look like potential for collage. Everything, I think, looks like, oh, I could add that to my art. Or you see a headline somewhere and it's talking about de-stressing or, you know, embracing nature, and you think, oh wow, I can add that to my next collage. I want to save that. So you end up cutting out all these things. I also look at magazines now. Everything's a circle, everything's a square. If I think I can add it to my collage, you know, Walmart or Canadian Tire sends out a flyer. It's got all these cushions in it for summertime. I cut out all the pictures of all the cushions. I know there's one in the Collage stash on one of these tables here that says Carpe Diem on a cushion. Well, that's great. Add it to your piece of art. If you do want to do some hand lettering, I have a couple of tips for you. My normal penmanship is pretty much like that of a doctor. You can't read it at all. And so people in my family in particular are often surprised and they say, how did you do that nice lettering? How did you write the word peace in such perfect script? And the only way I can do it is if I tell myself, I'm not writing, I'm drawing each letter. Each letter in the word becomes its own little drawing, and I really go slowly. So I just said the word peace. Let's say, for example, normally if I was to write the word peace, it would look something like that with a marker. Very, very messy, hard to read. But if I stop and take my time and I think about the letter P, and I just pull my pen down slowly and draw each letter in the word. And you can have a little bit of fun with sort of making your letters stylized. Now I've just done PR, which is not how you spell peace. So we are now going to do the word practice instead. PRAC. You can see how I'm just taking my time with it. It's still not going to be perfect, but perfection is way overrated. And look, I just wrote practe, P-R-A-C-T-E. It's not a real word. Maybe it's a word in Latin, but I started thinking about the letters more than what I'm actually writing. And I think I went back and forth from peace to practice. Anyway, I think you get my point. And it doesn't matter. I could cut these letters up and use them later, but I'm going to toss them aside for now. So you can also add collage words. You could also use rubber stamps. I have some rubber stamps here, and this is just a little set of alphabet stamps. If any of you would like to use them, you're more than welcome. Stamps are a great way to put words on your page. You can also use stencils. I don't think I have any alphabet stencils with me. This is my, oh yes, I do. This is my stencil binder. Everybody has a stencil binder, right? And I will quickly show you, I've talked about mark making and patterns and stuff. If none of this feels comfortable to you and you still want something that looks a little more, I don't know, organized, balanced, even, maybe having all your shapes exactly the same size is really important to you and it helps you to feel calm. If perfect straight lines are what helps you to breathe deeply, then perfect straight lines is what you can make. You can use a ruler. This is a stencil that actually gives you straight lines. But most of my stencils are handmade. I cut them from plastic folders or bits of cardboard and cardstock. This is a grid stencil that I made. Here I wrote the word thanks, which is great. I can just take one of my makeup sponges and pop some paint through there and send somebody a little thank you note. These are stencils that I just made on cardstock, and this one was actually on an old flyer. It's covered in paint now, but I just cut some circles, some holes into a page. So you can make your own stencils really easily, but back to using a letter stencil. We all remember these probably from school, but they're great if you want to put some words down on your page and you really want your words to be clear and neat and legible and you're not comfortable doing it yourself. A stencil's great. I also highly recommend two things. One, either practice writing the words or phrasing you want on your page on a separate scrap paper, or write it onto a piece of paper that's going to be complementary to the colors you already have going on here, and actually attach the word or phrase on a separate piece of paper. I know a lot of people who do that because that way you're removing the fear. You're not worried that you're going to misspell the word on live camera right here on the page. Imagine if I had written practe on this page. Then I'd have to glue something over it. It's all good. The lettering looks great. Thank you. So there's that option. Another option, which will sound a little more advanced, but trust me, if you give yourself a little bit of practice, hand cutting letters is super fun. And you can actually cut out the words like I did here in paper glue scissors. You could use the stencil to get started if you wanted to stencil out the letters and then cut them out. There's all kinds of options, so don't get hung up on your handwriting. So let's all take a couple of minutes. Was that me?
You just leaned close to your mic.
Too close to the mic. Let's all take a couple of minutes to add a little bit of text, some words or phrases to our pieces of art. And then we will come back and look at adding some marks and some mark making. I am digging through my scraps. This is a piece of paper, I can tell. I covered the paint with one of those garlic bags, and then I took my finger and I scraped through the paint to show some paint that was on the lower layers of the piece. Now, I glued this little bit of paper here earlier, and I'm not loving it there, but I remember that I glued it there to cover up the heart that wasn't my favorite heart. So I'm going to position my word across here. There's no right or wrong, but I would encourage you to look for the spots of blank space or openness in your piece. You want to leave some openness, but that's also a great opportunity to write some words down here. And as I mentioned before, I've got a lot of pairs of scissors, but I'm a big fan of just tearing paper. I love soft torn paper edges. Reminds you of book paper when books used to be, well, they still are made that way sometimes. I am looking for something to write with on this dark paper. Does everybody have an idea of a word or phrasing they want to add?
I wrote while you were talking.
Good, okay. I know what I want to say now, so.
Even little like printed ones if you wanted to cut them in. If you want to, you don't.
Another thing that's great for this type
You wanted
of
to look at some words.
art making is if you can get your hands on some paint pens. Acrylic paint pens used to be hard to find, and they used to be kind of expensive. But nowadays you can find them all over the place, and I have picked up some dandy ones at the dollar store. So I have to tell you that what I am feeling most grateful and happy about this morning is the fact that I am here in this room with people who I really care about and love to spend time with. And we're getting back together and we're creating together and opening and sharing our hearts. And that feels so good. I've written the words coming back together. They're not super clear. I've written them just some printing with my white pen. And I'm going to tear the edges a little bit more. And I am going to, I was going to put it up top, but now I've changed my mind. Nope, I'm still going to put it up top, but I'm going to put it over to the side, and then I'm going to add some fun stuff around it. Okay, some glue. Okay. So now we've got a bunch of things glued onto the page, and they're all still sort of separate. I want to tie things together a little bit, and I want to add a little bit more fun to it. I've got some bottled ink here. You can get bottled ink in all sorts of different brands, different types. There's acrylic ink, there's water-based ink, there's pigment-based ink, which I think this might be. Some of them react with water, some of them don't. I rarely use this stuff, but I'm just gonna see what happens if I drop some drops here. I don't even know what color I grabbed. It's berry-licious. Ooh, okay. You can see I'm just going for it, sticking them wherever I feel like. So I encourage you, if you think of something, just try it. Why not? What's the harm, right? So now I've got some purpley pinky splotches all over here, and I'm gonna smoosh them with my baby wipe. And then I'm gonna take the baby wipe that picked up some of this inky color, and I'm literally just smashing it around. And how much fun is that? I don't know about you, but sometimes if I think about what's underneath this big heart in particular, let's just give it a few good whacks. There. But I know, again, this just seems silly, but what I'm doing is actually tying the piece together, because now there's something that connects all these hearts and this little bit of paper. I'm gonna get my white gel pen out again, and I'm gonna look at my doodle exercises from earlier. Yes, and I knew this would happen. I am looking at those white circles, the bubbles, and this is when the mark making part of art journaling comes into play. I mean, you can do this whenever you want. Literally whenever you want, wherever you want. This is, as I mentioned before, it's doodling. I am putting little bunches of circles together. This kind of looks like, I don't know, a bunch of grapes right now. And I'm just having fun. I'm not worrying too much about this being the next masterpiece to hang at the Museum of Modern Art. I'm having fun. And lo and behold, I think these bubbles may turn into a heart shape. One thing I can tell you, and you may have already guessed, is I'm not really directing the art is directing me. It's taking me on a journey. It's taking me out of my head. I mean, yes, I'm present, I'm aware, I'm in a television studio with other people. There's lights and camera and stuff going on. I can hear the air ventilation system. And I must say, the air in here is really nice. And that is important to me because one of my disabilities is the fact that I am very sensitive to chemicals and scents. So a scent-free environment is one of the accommodations that I require, and reachability always makes that happen for me. And many of us have accommodations that we need to be able to work or gather socially. And it's really great when those needs are met. So my bubbles are turning into another heart. There's another heart just coming out of the page. And I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end when we have some time for show and tell. But often when I sit down to make something like this, as I said, there's not always a real plan. And you have these happy little accidents and these moments of wonder where you think, oh, wow, I didn't plan to do that, but that turned out really great. So now I've got this beautifully lopsided heart made up of bubbles on my page. And I'm just gonna add some bubbles in little tiny groupings in a few other spots on the page. You could choose to do X's and O's. You could choose to do squiggly lines. In fact, I just thought I'm gonna outline each of my hearts with my white pen. You could again do this with any color you like. It doesn't have to be a pen, could be a pencil. Now, these gel pens will sometimes skip and you don't get a complete line, and it's sort of messy and broken, and that is A-okay with me. Sometimes, depending on what kind of paints and things you've already put down on the page, like if I had put pastels or a lot of crayons on here, it would not welcome this gel pen on top, and that's okay too. I discover things as I'm going, and you know, I mentioned earlier about how some people aren't really into heart shapes. I'm generally not, I don't use a lot of hearts in my art and in my work, but I love using them this way. And I like that my hearts are never going to look like the perfect red Hallmark heart on a Valentine's Day card. My heart's just like the one beating inside my chest is messy. And again, just outlining each of my little hearts and adding some random little blobs of circles or bubbles, as I'm calling them, around the page. Just gives a little bit of visual interest and an opportunity for you or whoever is looking at this to let their eyes take a little journey around the page. And I'm also discovering more things as I go. This Berrylicious ink that I used reacts with my white pen. So anywhere that I draw white over it, it turns to purple. Again, another little happy accident. Yeah, this isn't quite done, but it's getting there. And it feels good, it feels fun, because I'm feeling the lovey-dovey, and I've done this before. I'm gonna put some X's and O's, another great mark-making little mark that you can make very easily. Hugs and kisses for myself, hugs and kisses for everyone joining in, hugs and kisses to heal my heart, and I am almost done. I've still got a little spot over here that not much is going on. So I think I'm just gonna color in this circle of paper that I glued down with some purple crayon so it sort of blends in. And there we go. I could also go back to my little toilet paper roll heart, dip it in some ink or paint, and stamp some hearts around here. I could do some paint splatters, which sounds like a really good idea. Does anybody have a time check for me?
21.
Sorry?
12:21.
12:21. Okay. We are running out of time. Surprise, surprise that I could talk this long. Instead of doing some paint splatters on my little heart art, I'm just going to leave that there for a sec and show you guys a few other handy little inexpensive tools from home. I showed you the big giant stamp that I made earlier. This is also a stamp of my hand. Of course, my hand is quite a bit bigger than this stamp. I traced my hand, put it on the photocopier, shrunk it down, cut it out on a piece of paper, put that paper on some craft foam from the dollar store, and just glued it to a little bit of cardboard. So now I can put my own hand all over things in my journals, which is super fun. This is an eraser, a white eraser that I carved a little flower stamp into. That's something that you can do at home that's super fun. And then if we had time today, I could put some white ink on this and I could stamp some little flowers around on my piece of paper there. But we won't do that right now. I'm going to show you in these last few minutes just a couple of these journals that I made with cereal boxes and cardboard boxes. So this is one of my pandemic journals, and it is made out of recycled cardboard, and all of the pages inside are made with Collage and recycled paper. There's nothing in here that didn't already have something on it or hadn't been previously used. This is another example of one of those pages where I wrote down all my feelings and then I scribbled all over it. I miss being with my mom. This was early days in the lockdown, and we could only see each other outside briefly in the cold. So this was a great way for me to work out some of my feelings. And this was a page I did about my art friends. I wrote the words extraordinary women. I cut out each letter individually from a magazine to spell out the words. And then I made these little stick people, and I put 2 hearts and I wrote together apart. And then you could fold the little people back together. So sometimes my art journals are really involved. Other times it's something very, very quick and simple. This was finger painting and it was an image from an old, really old, like 100-year-old book that had activities to do indoors. So I changed the headline to Pandemic Playtime and was suggesting that these were ways we could spend time indoors. I have another journal here, which we were looking at earlier, and I don't see it now in this mess. It was full of all sorts of different techniques and stuff that I like to use in my art journaling. Here it is. So this I call my Journal of Spark, and I think it's a good one to show you right now because it's full of accessible things that you can do at home. This is a dollar store notebook with lined paper, like just as cheap as a scribbler, but tiny. I put some paint and some painted tape over the cover. Painting on tape is super fun. Paint on masking tape, and then you've made your own washi tape. So this is a page that I did with bubble wrap, and I simply put some gold paper down on a paper plate, pushed the bubble wrap into it, and then pushed the bubble wrap into the paper. This is one of those coffee sleeves that I mentioned earlier, and I've written here that it's things rescued from the recycling. Just little bits of packaging that are fun to add. I love using vintage flowers and black and white illustrations. This is some fabric that I used, and again, that wine cork that I was using earlier to stamp some paint on there. Circles, we did circles earlier using anything we could find that was a circle shape. This is using some of that mesh stuff from the produce department again, making layers of acrylic. This is fun. You can do something 3-dimensional. And I didn't fold this myself. This came from one of those little dollar store paper party balloon things that I cut up and just glue it into the book. So you can see a lot of this is just play. These are literally scribbles of fluorescent pink because I was trying to make friends with the color fluorescent pink. Wasn't one that I used very often. Cleanup papers. I gave everybody a piece of paper at the beginning today to mess around with and catch paint. That's not going in the garbage. That can be cut up, especially this part here where it's all full of scratches and marks. That will make a lovely little piece of collage paper. Things you find in magazines, I mentioned that earlier. This is the underwriting technique where you write over your own handwriting over and over again, and then you can't see it. Pretty things you find and spots of color. Using labels. This is a bit of plastic, it's like a sink sponge or something that made some lovely texture. Little bits of plastic can be fun to just have a clear little flap or a window. Hand cutting paper, I hand cut the words, hand cut paper. So you get the idea. These are all techniques, doodles, mark making. This whole page is just made with little marks. Little black marker, some yellow triangles, some purple stars, and boom, we've got a pattern. So this can be really super relaxing, just like meditation, just doing that over and over again. Washi tape, stripes on the page. So I encourage you to take a few pieces of paper, fold them together, stick a staple or some tape on it, make your own little journal. and start playing with mark making or playing with some of the things you found in your kitchen and in your bathroom for making art with. And yeah, I'll share some more of my things with reachability. I have a lot more journals that I will show you all another time. This one is made from cardboard, like literally a cardboard packing box, that thick corrugated stuff. Scraped a bit of paint on each piece of paper, each piece of cardboard with my gift card, and then I taped it all together with heavy-duty packaging tape. You don't need to know how to sew. You don't need to buy expensive journals. If you've got some paper bags and magazines and even some coffee filters lying around, you can make art. On that note about the coffee filters, if you don't have any paint at home, you can use coffee, you can use grape juice, you can peel some carrots or some beets. There is color around you in your life, and I hope that you can find a bit of color and a bit of paper and a little bit of quiet time for yourself to enjoy some art journaling and just give yourself a pat on the back for spending this time doing it today. And yeah, carry on with your art journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jess, and everybody who came along.
Thank you.
And I think we're done. Yeah. Any questions? You can find me on social media. You can find me through Reachability. And that's it, folks. Reachability, BAAFF, Blue Nose, Abilities Arts Film Festival. Thank you. Okay.